The last time I ranked NHL prospect pools was all the way back in January. And since then, we've seen not just a lot of trades, but of course the 2024 NHL Draft, which has shaken up the entire ranking. So today we're going to go through each team, delving through their top prospects to see who comes out on top and where your team could lie. So make sure you watch till the end to see where your team goes and all the rankings here, and hit that subscribe button for more hockey prospect talk just like this all throughout the year. Now, the 2024 NHL Draft definitely changed things, with especially a lot of teams having multiple first-round picks, but there was also trades that changed the rankings quite a bit. You had the Connor Geekie to Tampa deal, and even before that, you had the Hunter Brustewitz to Calgary deal. A lot of prospects swapping teams, which changed things quite a bit. Now, starting us out today with the worst prospect pool in the NHL, and this is a team that was kind of on the up and up over the last year, but just with how many other teams had great 2024 drafts, it kind of knocked them down to number 32, and at the last place spot, I have the Pittsburgh Penguins. Now, I think this year more than any other season, I don't think there's any team out there that has a truly bad prospect pool. There's a couple of pieces on this Penguins prospect pool that I like quite a bit. Brian Yeager, who they got 14th overall back in 2023, is a big one, and you also got Tanner Howe from this last draft on top of Max Swanson and a couple other pieces forward-wise. You got Harrison Brunicky as a second rounder this year on top of Owen Pickering and other players too, like Emil Piniemi. And on the goaltending side, I think they have one of the stronger goalie prospect pools. Joel Blomqvist is one of the better goalie prospects in the NHL. He's had a great season in the AHL Wilkes-Barre this last year, and he could be a pretty under-the-radar starter in the future on top of Sergei Murashov as well. I don't think the Penguins are horrible in any one direction, but I just don't think they have the true star power to go up higher. Next up, we go on to number 31, and probably the prospect pool with the worst depth in the league. I would have the Boston Bruins. I think they're saved a little bit by some of the top-end players. Dean Letourneau, of course, is a 25th overall pick, instantly puts out the most potential out of anybody in their pool. Fabian Lysell, of course, is always a favorite for me, slowly progressing in the AHL, getting better and better. I think the big weakness for this pool, though, is defense. I think Elliot Grunewald in the 4th round this last year is probably the best bet to have NHL potential. Quinnipiac commit, he's somebody as a defenseman I could see being quite decent. And I also think goaltending-wise, their future tandem in Phillips Feedback playing for Providence and Reed Dick having some great seasons in Swift Current. Those are the two goalies going forward, and they are pretty solid. I would say defense and a lack of depth holds it back, but there's still a couple of pretty good forwards here, which puts it at number 31 for me. On to number 30, and honestly a team I debated having in the last place spot, but moved up very recently, is the Tampa Bay Lightning, a team that has made some really interesting additions over the past week or so. You, of course, have the forwards already that are there, like Isaac Howard, Ethan Gunther, and Dylan Duke, who, of course, I'm always a big fan of, but they went out in the Mikhail Sergachev trade and got Connor Geekie, of course, an 11th overall pick by Arizona back in 2022. That is a major addition to their prospect pool, somebody that's developed incredibly, and especially this last year was a beast in the WHL. On the defensive side, it's a little bit more thin. Jan Golicic in the 4th round, good physical defenseman. Eamon Powell has been a pretty great player with BC over these past couple of years, but that I would say is pretty much it. And on the goaltending side is a little bit thin too, especially with Anjefelt signing over in Sweden. Harrison Menigan, who they drafted in the 7th round this last year, is probably their best bet, but I would say still a project there. Now we move on to 29 and the Edmonton Oilers, and I think their pool is pretty much summarized as solid. There's a lot of good guys that I think will be pieces in the future. Nothing that'll blow you away by any means, but I do like the Oilers pool quite a bit better than I did just a few months ago. I think the 2024 draft was pretty key for them. You got Sam O'Reilly, but on top of that, forward-wise, you got Xavier Bourgault, Maxime Berzonkin, who I'm a pretty big fan of, and Shane LaChance as well in the NCAA has been progressing pretty well too. On the defensive side, I would say Bo Akey is by far the best option. Had a really unfortunate injury this year, Barry, but I still think long-term will be a good piece. And I think goaltending-wise, this might be the biggest strong suit of this pool. Emil Vinny was my best goaltender in the 2024 draft. They got him at 64th overall, and Olivia Rodrigue, who's been progressing well in the AHL system too, is somebody that could be maybe a backup in the future as well. I think for the Oilers, the goaltending is the strength, but just the consistency across the board is very solid. Now coming in next up at number 28, we got the Stanley Cup champions in the Florida Panthers. They're a team that has had some lack of depth over the past few years, but I still think has some pretty good roster players coming up, especially on the forward group. You got the players already established there in the prospect pool, like Maki Semiskevich. I still love Grayson Sachin, Justin Sortiv, Jack Devine's an underrated one. You also got the 2024 duo in Linus Eriksson and Zephyr, two Swedish guys who I think will be very solid bottom 6 players eventually. On the defensive side, it's a little bit thin. I think Matvei Shervin is their best choice, but you also got Merrick Alsher there and Ludwig Jonsson, some solid European D. And on the goaltending side, Spencer Knight, leads the way. Even though he's older, I still think eventually he will be Florida's star. Now, number 27, just outside the top 5, for I think the first time I've been doing these prospect pool rankings, I have the New York Islanders, and this is really propelled by a major 2024 draft, and this was a big one for them, getting Cole Eisman 20th overall. That was huge. I also like Camille Bednark on the forward side in the second round, 61st overall, and that's on top of a pretty solid base already in players like William DeFore, Danny Nelson, Quinn Finley, Jesse Nurmi. On the defensive side, you got Jesse Pulkkinen for a little bit of electricity, a ton of offense at 6'6", and on the other defensive players, they got Isaiah George, Callie Odilis, and for some more offense, Zach Schultz. And I really like the goaltending tandem they drafted in this last draft, getting Marcus Gidloff. You also got Dmitry Gazman as well. And for the Islanders in really all positions now, they're pretty well set up, and getting some star power in Eiserman does not hurt. Next up, coming at number 26, I got the Ottawa Senators. This was a team that I was kind of going back and forth on and where it actually plays in the end, because I do like some parts of their pool. I think forward-wise, Oscar Pettersson might be my most interesting out of the whole group. He's somebody that's really developed well over in Sweden and now in the AHL for Belleville. On top of that, I think also Stephen Holiday, really underrated player for Ohio State, had a great playoffs for Belleville as well. He's going to be an interesting piece going forward. On top of guys like Zach Ostiachuk, Blake Montgomery as a Badger commit. He was a really good pick, I would say, in the 4th round for the Sens. On the defensive side, of course, Carter Yakimchuk now leads the way for them in a pretty big margin, and offensively, he's going to be easily the best offensive defenseman in the pool already. That's on top of guys like Hoyt Stanley and Tyler Clevin, who will bring some defensive play on top. But to me, the biggest thing for Ottawa that they have going for themselves is the goaltending. Levi Marilainen is one of the better goaltending prospects in the NHL. That's on top of Kevin Riedler, who has been really solid in the USHL this last year, and Matt Zugard as well. And those three are pretty great pieces to have goaltending-wise, especially Marilainen, who's one of the better ones out there. Next up, number 25, we go into the LA Kings, who I think are pretty top and goalie heavy. Forward-wise, Liam Greentree, to me, absolutely clears everybody else in the power forward puck protection game he'll bring. He's somebody at 26 overall who is a great pick for LA. On the defensive side, too, Brant Clark is by far the best, somebody that I feel like should have gotten more of an opportunity in the NHL last year, but just was not given the opportunity. Hopefully, he'll be a full-time NHLer next year, but kind of like Ottawa, to me, the big strength is the goaltending. Eric Portillo was somebody who's really been great with Ontario. He's somebody that I think could be a real good starter in the future. You also got players on top of that like Hampton Solinsky, who has had a phenomenal USHL campaign. And then from this last draft and getting Carter George too, those three guys are pretty incredible and will lead the way for LA's goaltending in the future. Next up, at number 24, going to one of the teams, honestly, that rose the most for me in these rankings, and that's actually the Colorado Avalanche. They had quite a few players, especially in the 2023 draft, having excellent seasons, and their 2024 draft to me was honestly pretty impressive. You got on the forward side, of course, Callum Ritchie, who had a fantastic season for Oshawa, on top of Oscar Olesen, William Zellers, and Christian Humphreys from this last draft. On the defensive side, Mikhail Gulyayev, somebody that's getting used to the KHL already, is somebody that I liked quite a bit and has progressed well since he's been drafted, and that's, of course, on top of other players like Sean Behrens and Chris Romain and Torrey Pittner from this last draft. And then the goaltending side, Ilya Nabokov at 38th overall this last draft too, on top of Luka Cloutier and Ivan Yunin. Honestly, out of anybody, the Avs had the best goaltending draft in 2024, and that really propels them in this year's ranking. At number 23, next up, I got the Vegas Golden Knights, and even though they won the Stanley Cup and have been contending for so long, really the reason they've been able to stay here is just because they keep taking best player available in the draft, no matter what they might be. On the forward side, you got players like Trevor Connolly, and also the players that they've drafted before still. There's a lot of good guys there. You got Brendan Brisson, Matthias Sapovalev. On the defensive side, though, you got Lucas Cormier, Artu Karku, and then on the goaltending side, Pavel Moisevich was a pretty great pick at 83rd overall for Vegas, and that's on top of other goaltenders they have like Cameron Whitehead, who have been great with Northeastern, Carl Lindbaum, who has been great in the SHL too. They have one of the best goaltending trios as well. Really a great run of goaltending over these last few picks, but Vegas is one of the best out there. Number 22, unfortunately, this is where my Dallas Stars have to end up, and this is just because of graduates like Logan Stankoven coming up, but they still have quite a few solid, great guys in their pool. Maverick Bourque on the forward side is a big one. Emil Hemming was a good get as well in the first round this year. On the defensive side, Liam Bichsel, of course, is always going to be a favorite for me, and that's on top of guys like Aaron Menidian, Christian Kyrou as well. I wouldn't say there's any top-tier goaltender, but in terms of the top-end players, I think the Stars still do pretty well, but the depth might be a little bit lacking now. Next up at number 21, I got the Toronto Maple Leafs, and they're kind of like Edmonton's pool, but I think they have a stronger quantity of just solid guys in their pool. Easton Cowan, I think, is the best among them. Somebody that had a fantastic sophomore season with London. He has just been brilliant since he was drafted, and it's great to see that. And you got other forwards, of course, like Fraser Minton, Nick Moldenhauer, who I quite like, and Nikita Grebyankin. On the defensive side, I think Toppy Nemula is still the best out there, but of course you add Ben Danford. I like Noah Chadwick as well. And on the goaltending side, I think Dennis Hildeby has been a great find for Toronto in the 4th round. He's somebody that for the Marlies has been great, and I think for the Leafs could be pretty solid too. Now coming inside the top 20, first we're going to start it out with the Vancouver Canucks, a team like Dallas that I think is pretty top heavy. Jonathan Lekaramaki and Artyom, I think, are the two premier ones in the 4 group. Defensively, you got Tom Willander, you got Elias Pettersson, two guys who I think will be solid top 4D. And I think one of the main reasons why Vancouver will be pretty high on this list is because I still consider Artur Shilovs a goaltending prospect. He's somebody that was fantastic for Vancouver in the playoffs this last year, and hopefully will be a full-time NHLer. I mean, he showed what he was made of, and I hope he continues to entertain because he is ridiculous. Next up at number 19, I got the Winnipeg Jets, and this is considering Rutger McGrody already traded, which is a pretty big blow to the prospect pool. But forward-wise, I think Brad Lambert still leads the way for them. Colby Barlow, Chaz Lucius is also up there as well. Nikita Chibrikov will always be a favorite for me. On the defensive side, though, I think, honestly, Winnipeg goes pretty well, especially on the European side. Alphonse Frey, great pick at 37th overall this last draft. And I also love Elias Salomonsson, who's been developing really well in Sweden over the past couple of years. And on the goaltending side, Thomas Milic has been a good development for Winnipeg. He's been somebody that was just drafted immediately, had a great rise in the World Juniors, and so far in the pros is looking as he should. Now going on to another pool that's pretty skewed towards the top end players, I got the New York Rangers, who actually are in a pretty good spot here considering their contending status. Gabe Perreault is one that really boosts this pool. 23rd overall, already looking like a steal there. But that's on top of Brendan Othman, Adam Sikora, Brett Berard, and Rael Boyard as well, who they got from this last draft. On the defensive side, EJ Emery is definitely the best, but I also like Drew Fortescue, USA World Juniors guy as well. He's somebody that could be a middle pair D. On the goaltending side, Dylan Garand is probably their best bet. He's somebody that I think was pretty underrated in the AHL this last year for Harper, especially when I was watching. He's somebody that I think could be a pretty solid fringe guy at the NHL level too. But really, Perreault, Emery, these are the guys that really boost this pool for me. At the next place spot, we got the Rangers rival, the New Jersey Devils. To me, I think they're limited a little bit by the lack of top-end forwards. Lenny Hamanaho was probably the best among them, looking pretty good as a 58th overall pick. Had a great season in the Liga, on top of another great season in 2023. Great goal scorer coming up. The defensive side is really the big strength. You got Anton Salayev. You also got Seamus Casey as well. Nemets has graduated, so he's not a part of this list, but still, I would say those are two pretty big ones. And then you got Mikhail Yegorov. You also got Nico Dawes as well on the goaltending side. Yegorov, though, in terms of top-end potential, definitely brings the most. I think the Devils' pool is solid, a little bit mediocre, but still the top-end guys they have will be very effective NHLer. Next up, right at the halfway point, I got the Washington Capitals, and they're one of the teams from the 2024 draft that, to me, improved the most. You, of course, got their 17th overall pick in Tarek Parasak, but you already got Ryan Leonard, Ivan Miroshnichenko, you got Andrew Crystal, Hendrix Lapierre, who had an incredible AHL playoffs. On the defensive side, I thought they improved quite a bit too. You, of course, got Cole Hudson in the second round, but that's on top of a pretty good core already in Vincent Ioro, Ryan Chesley, Leon Mugli, Brent Johnson, and then goaltending-wise, I think Nicholas Kemp in the 4th round was also a pretty great pick and instantly their best goalie prospect. And in the NTDP, someone who develops slowly, but I think surely could be an NHL. Next up, number 15, we got the Nashville Predators, and they're a team that just has a great balance all around. I love the balance of skill and smarts, and especially in the 4 group, how many options they have. They got Igor Shurin 22nd overall and Teddy Stiga in the 2nd round of this last draft, but that's on top of players like Fyodor Svechkov, Miguel Marquez in this draft, Joaquin Kamel, Matthew Wood, Reed Schaefer, Zachary LaRue. Defensively, they're also improving. Tanner Molendijk is still by far their best choice. He's somebody at 24th overall who's looking quite solid. And I will say this exercise does put Yaroslav Askarov out of the picture. Kind of like Rutger McGrody, I'm just assuming that he'll eventually be traded. If Askarov is a part of this, I think they are a couple spots higher. But still, I think the Preds, for the position they're in, for how much they're loading up, they got a pretty good core of youthful players coming up here. Next up, number 14, and you guys know I think this team has an incredibly underrated pool, and that is the St. Louis Blues. I think the Blues are one of the best examples of teams going for maybe these bigger, stronger players, but not really sacrificing too much potential in the short term. Of course, you got Jimmy Snuggerud as the main forward prospect, and he's an incredible one to have. You also got Dalibor Dvorsky and other players like Otto Stenberg and a couple other ones I like too, like Alexandre Kaskamaki. And you also got the forward, a big one I think in this last draft they got was Adam Yeko, who I think in the third round especially is pretty great value. Defensively though, St. Louis has really beefed up recently. You got Adam Juracek at 16th overall, and you got a ton of other players like Lucas Fischer, Theo Lindstein, Michael Butchinger, Quinton Burns, and on the goaltending side, Vadim Sarenko, who's been developing in the AHL these past couple of years, is looking like a pretty good potential fringe guy in the future. Next up at number 13, we go on to always one of my favorite pools of the bunch in the Carolina Hurricanes. If you're looking for quantity over quality, well, the Carolina Hurricanes are always at an incredible level. And the forward group, you got led by Nikita Artamana, but also a ton of other players like Lev Trigazov, Jaden Perron, Bradley Nadeau, who really boosted up. On the defensive side, it's looking pretty good too. Dominic Badinka, Alexander Nikishin, and a whole lot of others too. You got Scott Morrow as really a great top 3 in the future. Goaltending wise, I think they're a little bit thin with Ruslan Kanayev in the MHL doing pretty well. He's probably the best option there, but really the top ND and the depth in the forward are the name of the game here. Now, at number 12, I have the Philadelphia Flyers, and this is really raised by Matvei Michkov, one of the best prospects in the NHL, and that definitely does raise where Philadelphia is in these rankings. There are a few other prospects I do quite enjoy, like Jet Luchenko, Devin Kaplan, Denver Barkey. On the defensive side, Oliver Bonk, Emil Andre, those two I really do like. On the goaltending side, too, they got quite a few interesting options. Igor Zaravin, Carson Bjarnason, Alexander Kolosov. So goaltending-wise, I think they're pretty good, too, but really Michkov is the one leading the way. And now we go just outside the top 10 with the Seattle Kraken, and to me, this tier is so close between 12 and number 1. There's really not that much of a difference to me, and the Seattle Kraken come at this spot. I think the forward is really the biggest strength for them by far. You got Shane Wright, Berkly Cann, which is just insane, those two centers coming up in the system, and that's on top of players like Yanni Nyman, who have really progressed, Jagger Furcus, Edward Schale, Clark Caswell, Ollie Josephson. You got Oscar Fisker-Molgaard, Ryan Winterson, Carcer, Rekoff. I mean, the forward group is insane. I would say defensively, they're a little bit weaker. Ty Nelson, to me, is the big one. I do still think like they could have gone for a more positional lead with their first round pick, but still, Berkly Cann is incredible. I think goalie-wise, you got a pair of Finnish goalies in Nicholas Kakko and Kim Sarainen, who I think will be very solid in the future. I like those two guys, and I love to see them loading up on Finns. But now, getting us started with the top 10 prospect pools in the NHL, this is a team that has been raised a ton over the past year, and that is the Calgary Flames. Especially a couple of great drafts here for Calgary recently. You got Matt Coronado already as an established prospect, but you got the forwards they drafted this last year in Andrew Basha, in Luke Misa, in Matvei Gridin. A lot of really good quality options there on top of Samuel Hanzik and players like Jacob Pellichet and William Stromgren and Idar Sudiev in the pool. I also like defensively getting Zane Parekh. That is a massive addition, and offensively just brings creativity and electricity that prospect pool really needed, in my opinion, to get to that top tier in the NHL. And you already got some solid guys too with the players they acquired in Hunter Brustovitz, and that's on top of Henry Muse, Jerry Poirier, Yanni Nurmo, Artem Gruzhnikov, Jan Kuznetsov. Now, this ranking is also helped by the fact that I still consider Dustin Wolf a prospect. He hasn't played enough games yet to me to consider him a graduate as of yet, but hopefully next year he will be a full-time NHLer. But he's a big boost, and that 2024 class is a big boost as well. Next up at number 9, I got the Minnesota Wild, and they're a team that also had an incredible 2024 draft. To me, one of the best out there in terms of just steals per pick, and it's on top of already a great prospect pool, and especially on the forward side of Daniel Yurov, Liam Ogren, and of course in this last draft they got Ryder Ritchie as well on top of that, and players like Marat Kuzadinov, Riley Height, Caden Banky, Erasmus Kumpalainen. There's some good pieces there. Defensively, I think they really need to add a game breaker, and they did, getting Z Boom at 12th overall. To me, the best defenseman in the 2024 draft, and that is one heck of an addition to have. I will say outside of Boom and maybe Kiviharju, maybe Carson Lambos, there's maybe a little bit of a lack of defensemen who I think will be much of an impact at the NHL level. I would say that's the weakness for them, but of course you got the best goalie prospect in the entire world, in my opinion, in Jesper Wallstedt, who just in terms of pure potential brings so much to Minnesota and that pool. But overall, they're just very balanced, very mixed, but Z Boom really raises them for me. Next up at number 8, I got the Buffalo Sabres, and this is a team that just over the past couple of years has consistently consistently ranked in the top 10 for me, and for very good reason. The quantity they have, and also pretty good quality too, is just incredible. I could just name the amount. You got Constant Hellenius and Brody Ziemer in this last draft, on top of Savoy, Ostlund, Yuri Kulich, Anton Wahlberg, Victor Nusheb, Isaac Rosen. I mean, on the defensive side too, you now got Adam Kleber, Luke Osborne, Maxim Sturback. I would say there's no pure offensive guy who I think is going to change that defense, but they already have their offensive guys in Dahlin and Power, etc. on the team already. Now, I will say I'm not considering Devon Levi a prospect right now just because I think he's a sure thing already to be an NHLer, but I think Ryerson and Linders in the 7th round this last year was a fantastic pick, and for Buffalo, just the balance in the pool, man, it's pretty incredible to see. Just finally, get these guys graduated. I need to see them in the NHL. Next up at number 7, we go on to another team that is right there in the thick of it among the best prospect pools in the NHL, and that is the Utah HC, who now have Arizona inheriting a great pool, just continues that further with this last draft. You, of course, got TJ Ginla, 6th overall. You got Cole Baudouin, and a couple of really other solid picks there in the first few rounds. That's on top of Daniel Butte on the forward group, and even though they did get rid of Connor Geekie, which I do think hurts it a little bit, still, I think they made up for it in this 2024 NHL draft, and it's not that big of a deal. I mean, they got other players like Samuel Lipkin, Josh Doan, who I'm a big fan of. You got on the defense, though, Dmitry Simishev, who I think will be a big one for them. That's on top of players are now at the 2024 draft, and Will Skahan, and you also got Maverick Lamoureux, Artem Duda. I would also say goaltending-wise, they do pretty well here. They got Michael Robel, of course, as the main one, UMass player, 38th overall back in 2023, and also Melker Thielen, who, of course, started in the World Juniors for Sweden a year ago. He's someone that's been progressing really well since being drafted. Those two are pretty solid there. Utah has a great mix of bite, of speed, of size, and I think that'll really help them once they start getting competitive. Now, just outside the top 6, we go to a team that I don't think got worse in the prospect pool. It was just every other team around them got better with this 2024 draft, and that's the Detroit Red Wings. Now, I don't think they did badly whatsoever, but every team had higher picks or just had more potential with their picks, and Detroit, of course, over the last couple of years, have kind of gone more lower end. But I love Michael Brandsegg-Nygard, and that's on top of players like Marco Kasper and Nate Danielson and Carter Mazer, Dmitry Bolchinikov. I think defensively, Detroit really shines. Axel Sandy Palika, always a favorite of mine. But that's on top of Simone Edvinsson, Shai Buum, William Willander. On the goaltending side, of course, you got Trey Augustine and Sebastian Cossa as an incredible tandem, and I still think Detroit is incredibly balanced. I don't think there's any star prospect. Maybe Axel Sandy Palika comes the closest, but still in every position, they're pretty locked in here. Now, coming inside the top 5, naturally, one of my favorite pools in the NHL is the Montreal Canadiens, really juiced up by Ivan Demidov, really the first couple rounds in the 2024 draft, getting Demidov, Hage, Atois Koivu, some fantastic additions to the forward group there. And that's on top of a lot of great defensemen too, like David Reinbacher, and you got other players like Bogdan Konyashov, Adam Engstrom as well. Goaltending wise, of course, Jacob Fowler is my boy, one of my favorite goalie prospects in the entire NHL, and a future starter for Montreal. Really though, Demidov really makes or breaks. They needed an electric prospect to the pool, and they added that in Demidov. Next up at number 4, we go into the Anaheim Ducks, and they just continue to add to their prospect pool. This last draft forward-wise was pretty good, getting Beckett Seneca, Lucas Pedersen, Maxime Massé, and that's on top of Cutter Gauthier, Sasha Pashijov, Nathan Gaucher, some really good options there, and some good depth and star power. On the defensive side, though, Anaheim just continues to be really good. Stian Solberg as a violent D is a great piece. I still consider Olin Zellweger a prospect, so that raises them quite a bit. But you also got Terrence Smith, you got Noah Warren, Tristan Luneau. Goaltending-wise, Damian Clare is their top prospect, which I don't think is a bad thing. He's somebody that, as a second rounder last year, really performed well in the Allsvenskan. And this last year could be a full-time SHLer next year, which is going to be great for Anaheim. He's an underrated one for sure. Now going on to number 3, and now we go on to the Chicago Blackhawks, who I don't think had the disappointing draft that many people are saying. It wouldn't have been my draft if I were them, but still, I think they drafted quite a few good players. Forward-wise, I don't think they have a pure game breaker up to the level nearly of Bedard, but they still have quite a few good pieces in Nazer, Oliver Moore, of course, and you also got some solid players on top of that, like Marek Van Acker, Sasha Boisvert, John Mustard, AJ Spellacy in this last draft. Defensively, Artyom Levshunov immediately becomes their best defensive prospect, and you also got Sam Renzel, Nolan Allen, Ethan Del Mastro as solid pieces, and then goaltending-wise, Anu Gayan, Drew Comesso. That's a pretty good couple of goalie prospects coming up. I would say the big weakness, though, is a top-end forward, but still having Oliver Moore is probably the closest to that. Now on to number 2, and the runner-up, it is the San Jose Sharks, who have really been lifted since the Celebrini draft, and for good reason. I mean, with Celebrini, the best prospect in hockey, that really propels their stock a lot for me. You got Igor Chernyshov, Carson Wetch, Colin Graff, David Edstrom, of course, Will Smith and Quinton Musty. Those guys are going to be absolutely insane. I think defensively, though, they took a big step forward getting Sam Dickinson. Also, Leo Saulina Wallenius is a big addition, and that's on top of players I love a lot, like Luca Cagnoni and players like Jack Furlong as well. I do see the big weakness being goaltending. Christian Kirch, a UMass commit, is probably the best option there, but I was surprised to see them not go for a goalie higher in this draft. Still, though, there's time for that, but this Sharks pool is looking unreal. But now going on to number 1 and the best prospect pool in the NHL, I have the Columbus Blue Jackets. They're a team that just over the last few years has stacked wins and wins in the draft and just continue to do so. Caden Lindstrom at 4th overall is a unreal prospect to add at the position they got him in, and that's on top of Gavin Brindley, Luca Pinelli, William Whitelaw, Jordan Dumais, James Malatesta. I do think defensively they got a big addition in this draft, even though David Juracek is still the guy. They got Charlie Ellick, and Hidemi is a pretty good one, and that's on top of a lot of good defensive projects like Tanner Hendricks and Luca Morelli, and you of course got Stanislas Vozol, Carson Kuhlmans, Denton Matejchuk, Andrew Strafman. I mean, goaltending wise too, they're pretty set. Evan Gardner is a great add in the second round, and that's on top of Sergei Ivanov, Daniil Tarasov too. I just think the balance, and especially the top end guys, I'm a big fan of Juracek. I'm a huge fan of Caden Lindstrom, and those guys really propel it for me. You could have San Jose in this spot, and I can absolutely see why, but to me, with just how many players Columbus has added over the past few years, the depth that they have, to me, number 1 is entirely worth. But those are my NHL prospect rankings. Let me know down below what you guys think, what you agree, what you disagree, and of course, with my opinion, I want to hear yours down below. What is your number 1? What is your worst? Let me know all your thoughts, and of course, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and that notification bell, and I will see you guys in the next one. Have a great day, and goodbye.